Hello knitters, Barbara Benson here. I am an independent knitwear designer who also likes to make videos here on my YouTube channel, Watch Barbara Knit. Make sure to check in the description below the video where you will find links to all my online shenanigans, including how to get my patterns to knit up for yourself, how to join the Watch Barbara Knit Facebook group, and how to support me on Patreon. And of course, the details on anything I discuss in the video today. I was thinking about variegated yarn. I love variegated yarn. So many knitters I know love variegated yarn. You're drawn to it because it has all the colors. I mean, why buy a couple skeins of solid yarn that only have like one color each when you can get a yarn that has all the colors? But a lot of times, when you actually try to knit that yarn up, it becomes disappointing because it just doesn't work with the pattern that you've chosen for it. And I wanted to share with y'all a stitch called the woven stitch that I honestly is one of my favorite stitches for when I'm using a challenging variegated yarn. Something that is really got a lot of color in it or a lot of contrast in it, something that's been fighting me and not really working with anything I've tried to use it in. The specific yarn I'm going to be swatching for you is this one. And really, it doesn't get much more variegated than this. So I'm going to show you this tutorial. I'm going to walk you through it step by step. I'll also put in the notes the written instructions. Again, it's the woven stitch. It involves knitting, purling, and slipping your stitches. Stay tuned after the demo video and I'll talk to you a little bit more about why this stitch works and how you might be able to use that information to help you pick out better patterns for your variegated yarn. This is the woven stitch and I am working it over an even number of stitches. I also have a 2-stitch selvage on either side, so those are not part of the pattern, the stitch pattern. They're just there to help it lay flat. So row 1, which is the right side, is simply knit. All you have to do is knit across your stitches that you want to have the woven stitch on it. And then I'm to my last 2 stitches, which are my edge stitches. Not part of the pattern, but it's still just knit. So I'm flipping it over so we can work row 2, which is our wrong side. I'm going to work my 2 edge stitches, which since I'm working a garter edge, those are also knit. And now we're going to begin the pattern. So row 2, we are going to slip 1, then purl 1 all the way across. And when I slip, I'm going to insert my right hand needle from right to left, which is called purlwise, through this stitch and simply transfer it to the right hand needle. And you can see the yarn is still behind, which means it will show on the front. Then the next stitch is a purl. You have to move your yarn between the needles to the front. Again, insert purlwise, wrap, and purl. So it was slip 1, purl 1, and that is it. So again, slip 1, move the yarn to front between the needles, purl 1, slip 1, move the yarn to front between the needles, purl 1. If you tension the yarn in your right hand, I'm horrible at this. This is what that's going to look like. So we're going to slip 1, move the yarn to the front between the needles, insert and purl one. Then we have to move the yarn back behind for the slip. So slip that one, move it to the front between the needles so that we can purl, put it back, then put the yarn back to the back. I'm going to go back to the left hand tensioning because that's when I'm most comfortable. Again, slip, move yarn to front, purl, move yarn to back, slip, move yarn to front, purl, and that ends the pattern. It was slip one, purl one. That was it. Then I'm going to knit these last 2 stitches. Row 3 is, guess what? Row 3 is exactly the same as row 1. Row 3, all you do is knit. So we're just going to knit all. Now, that is the stitch that we slipped previously. And you can see that this little bar is the unworked yarn that ran behind the slip stitch. So we are going to just knit all these stitches, and you can see that's the purl stitch from the previous row. That's the slip stitch from the previous row, and it should alternate. If it doesn't alternate, then you have made an error. So it's fairly easy to double check yourself. And as you can see, since this is variegated yarn, the color is changing on us. To the last stitch, and we're going to turn it over for row 4. Row 4, we're going to knit the first 2 stitches. Doopy-doo, doopy-doo. Now, row 4, we are going to begin with a purl, and we are going to purl one, slip one. So yarn to front between the needles, purl one, then we're going to insert our needle from right to left and slip one, yarn to front, purl one, move the yarn to back, slip one. Since I tension in my left hand, you can see my move to yarn to back is all in one motion when I am purling. And then I just purled, so the next step is a slip, then I purl, slip, purl, slip, purl, slip, purl, and since it's an even number, we end on a slip. Then I have my 2 edges, going to knit 2. The reason why this takes 4 rows is because we are alternating which stitch is slipped in the columns. This is the first row we worked, and you see it's slipped here, and this is the row we just finished, and it slipped here, so it goes back and forth. And I've done a lot of it so you can see how awesome this looks in variegated yarn. Now, because I'm doing such a short piece, not very many stitches, it's almost striping based on how the yarn itself is dyed. And you can see how wild. This is the fiber seed yarn. It's called Sprout. It's a fingering weight, and I believe this colorway is called Mahi, and it is just a gorgeous, fun, variegated yarn. Very, very bright and colorful. And you can see how by slipping those stitches with the yarn visible on the right side, we're mixing up the colors. You get these little dashes of green going across the yellow. You get little dashes of this going across it, all the blues here. And so it helps mix up. Now here we ended up with all blue, and it's just sort of random how it's going to come out. The wider it is, the more random it's going to get, but it is just, I haven't met a variegated yarn that didn't love this stitch. It just looks great. It's very easy to work, and it lays actually nice and flat. It doesn't try to curl too horribly bad. This is what the back looks like, and you can see the slipped stitches, so it's a little different than reverse stockinette. Now I have another sample here I wanted to show y'all. So you could see this is another highly variegated yarn. So you could see this is what this variegated looked like when I just knit it in stockinette. And this bottom is the woven stitch. And you can see how it really has a different, it breaks it up. It has a very different visual appearance. It gives you like this little red is going in front of the screen, and instead of being like splotchy like this, you've got this great texture. Now, I'm not saying this looks bad. I like this, but it's just very interesting to me how variegated yarns interact with this particular stitch. You can do this stitch in the round, and all that means is row 1 is knit a row, then row 2 you will knit and then slip with yarn in front. Knit, slip with yarn in front, knit around, and then slip with yarn in front, knit. It really, what matters is you need to make sure you're staggering the slips so they zigzag, so they don't stack on top of each other, so they're alternating like this. You can do it over an odd number, you just have to compensate for that when you flip it over. So this is a fun, easy stitch called the woven stitch that absolutely works awesome in variegated yarn. Wasn't that easy? It really is a very easy stitch to do. It is very similar to a stitch called the linen stitch, which also makes use of slipping stitches with the yarn visible on the right side. The big difference between the linen stitch and the woven stitch is that the linen stitch, you are slipping stitches on every single row. You're doing it on the right side and the wrong side row, staggering it in the same manner. But when you are slipping stitches on every single row, it creates a very dense fabric. I prefer the woven stitch because it's easier to work. Another problem with slipping stitches on every single row is that it seems like it takes forever to get anywhere because that compacts it and you're just inching along. The woven stitch has those rest rows, the knit rows in between your slipped rows, and it just lets you get going a little faster and provide you a fabric that has a little bit more flexibility while still giving you the benefit of those stitches slipped with the visible bars. And that is what makes this stitch work. I mentioned it during the demo, but if you look for patterns, slip stitches by themselves, whether or not the yarn is in front or in back, slip stitches are wonderful for variegated yarn because what it does is it moves where that color is. And that yarn movement is essential to getting the best, the most out of your variegated yarn. So look for patterns that have slip stitches in it, patterns that have slip stitches with the bars in front. That really breaks up the color. And when you find, or you know, you can just add these little details in. Now, keep in mind what I said about compaction. It might change your gauge a little bit, but if you're knitting something in stockinette, throwing in a few rows of this textured stitch every so often will actually help break up the variegation and might make you happier. And it gives you a unique thing that's yours, that you helped make it up. I love the woven stitch, and I hope you do too, and have fun knitting and playing with it. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, click that like button, and if you would like to be notified whenever I upload a new video, please subscribe to my channel and select notifications. Thank you so much.